They left her to die alone, until one rancher changed her fate forever. The small town she had grown up in seemed quiet and ordinary to outsiders, but to her, it was a place that held memories of happiness, laughter, and warmth, memories that now felt like they belonged to someone else. Her family had once been her world, and the house she lived in had been full of life. But after a tragic incident that tore her family apart, Emily found herself facing the harsh reality of being completely alone. The days felt endless. She woke up each morning to the silence of a house that once echoed with voices and laughter. The rooms that had been filled with warmth now seemed cold and unfamiliar. Every corner reminded her of what she had lost: her parents' smiling faces, her younger brother's playful laughter, even the old dog that used to follow her around the yard. These were all memories that haunted her, making the present feel unbearable. The sense of abandonment weighed heavily on her, and for the first time, Emily truly understood the meaning of being left behind. Her neighbors, who had once been friendly, now seemed distant and indifferent. Some whispered about the tragedy, others pretended not to notice her at all. Emily felt invisible, as though the world had moved on without her. She tried to reach out, tried to speak to people, but her attempts were met with coldness or awkward avoidance. Each rejection, no matter how small, deepened her loneliness. It was as if everyone had made a silent agreement to forget her, leaving her to navigate the world alone. At first, Emily tried to keep herself busy. She spent hours walking through the fields behind her house, trying to distract herself from the emptiness that seemed to swallow her every thought. She wandered through the tall grass, watched the birds fly overhead, and listened to the wind rustle through the trees. Nature offered some comfort, a reminder that life continued even when hers felt paused. But even in these moments of peace, a shadow lingered, a feeling that she didn't belong anywhere anymore. She longed for someone to care, someone to notice her pain, but there was no one. As the days passed, Emily's struggle became not just emotional but physical. Food was scarce, and there were nights when she went to bed hungry, her stomach aching as she tried to ignore it. The simple tasks that others took for granted, cooking a meal, keeping the house clean, even taking care of herself, became challenges she could barely manage. The isolation made everything harder. Without guidance, support, or encouragement, Emily felt as though she was sinking deeper into a pit she could not climb out of. The loneliness and neglect became her constant companions, and some nights she would lie awake, tears streaming down her face, wondering if anyone would ever come for her. Despite everything, Emily had a spark inside her, a small, flickering flame of hope that refused to die. She remembered the lessons her parents had taught her, the values they had instilled in her, and the strength she had discovered within herself during tough times. This inner strength kept her moving, even when the world seemed determined to leave her behind. She learned to be resourceful, finding ways to make her meager supplies last, and to protect herself from the harsh weather and unpredictable dangers outside. Emily's resilience was quiet but powerful. It was the part of her that whispered, "I will survive, no matter what." One morning, Emily woke to the sound of the wind whipping through the broken windows of her home. She had grown accustomed to the cold, but it never got easier. She wrapped herself in an old, tattered blanket and stepped outside to collect water from the nearby well. The journey was short but exhausting, and each step reminded her of how fragile her situation was. Yet she persevered, because giving up was not an option, even though the temptation to do so was always there. She had no one to rely on but herself, and she knew that every day she survived was a victory in its own right. Emily's life was filled with small struggles, but it was also punctuated by moments that reminded her of what she was missing. She would see families walking together in the town square, children laughing and playing, and she felt a pang of longing so sharp it took her breath away. She missed the comfort of having someone to talk to, someone who would listen without judgment. The emptiness she carried was not just physical, it was emotional, a deep void that seemed impossible to fill. But even in her darkest moments, Emily never completely lost hope. She clung to the belief that something, or someone, might come along to change her fate. The turning point of this period in Emily's life came unexpectedly. One particularly harsh evening, a storm rolled in. The wind howled through the trees, and the rain fell in heavy sheets. Emily struggled to secure her home, but the weather was relentless. As the storm raged on, she realized just how vulnerable she was. The thought of facing this storm alone made her heart race with fear. She huddled in a corner, shivering, and whispered to herself, "Please, someone help me." It was a simple plea, but it carried all the weight of her loneliness, despair, and longing for rescue. It was in these moments of utter vulnerability that Emily's story began to shift. She didn't know it yet, but her life was on the brink of change. The darkness that had enveloped her for so long was about to be broken by an unexpected force, a person whose kindness and compassion would alter the course of her life forever. But at this moment, she could only wait, hope, and endure, drawing on the inner strength that had kept her alive through so much hardship. Emily's days of abandonment had shaped her, but they had not destroyed her. She was still brave, still alive, and still searching for the warmth, care, and understanding that had been taken from her. And although she could not see it yet, a new chapter in her life was quietly approaching, one that would test her resilience, reward her courage, and teach her that even in the loneliest moments, hope can arrive when it is least expected. The night fell slowly, and Emily lay awake listening to the storm, feeling both fear and anticipation. Somewhere beyond the walls of her lonely home, her life was about to intersect with someone who would change everything. Until then, she had to survive, to endure, and to hold onto the fragile flame of hope that burned quietly inside her heart. It was the only thing keeping her going, the only thing that whispered that her story was far from over. Life after that stormy night was no easier for Emily. The morning arrived with gray skies and a chill that seeped into her bones. The storm had left the world outside her small home in disarray. Fallen branches blocked pathways, puddles covered the uneven dirt roads, and the once familiar town seemed unfamiliar, as though the storm had washed away the comfort and safety she had once known. Emily stepped outside, shivering, her bare feet sinking slightly into the wet earth. Every movement was a reminder of how alone she truly was. Food was still scarce, and each day was a careful calculation of what she had left and how to make it last. Emily scavenged what she could. A few scraps of bread that had been left behind in a nearby shop, some wild berries she found near the forest, and sometimes roots or vegetables she could dig from the untended land. It wasn't much, and it never felt enough, but she learned to make do. She boiled water over a small fire she managed to start each morning, ate in silence, and tried to ignore the growling of her stomach. Hunger was an ever-present reminder of her vulnerability, but it also strengthened her determination to survive. Emily spent a lot of time walking through the town, observing the people who seemed to live lives so different from hers. Families hurried past her on the muddy streets, their laughter floating through the cold air. She would pause to watch children play in puddles, their shoes muddy, their cheeks red from the chill, and she would feel a pang of longing. She missed the warmth of having someone to care about, someone who cared about her. The emptiness she carried grew heavier with each passing day, and yet she refused to give in completely. It was during one of these walks that Emily first noticed the glances from people in the town. Some were curious, others judgmental, but very few offered kindness. One elderly woman had smiled at her once, calling out, "Be careful, dear," when Emily slipped in the mud. It was a small gesture, but it reminded Emily that even in a world that seemed indifferent, there were still traces of humanity, small sparks of warmth that could reach her if she was lucky. Despite the little signs of hope, danger was never far. The town was not kind to someone who had no protector, and Emily learned to keep her distance from trouble. She avoided people who looked threatening, and she stayed away from areas where she might be seen as vulnerable. Nights were especially difficult. The wind howled through the cracks in the walls of her home, and the darkness seemed heavier than the day. She would huddle under the thin blankets she had managed to salvage, hugging herself tightly, listening for every creak, every sound that might signal danger. Her imagination often turned the shadows into threats, and she learned to be alert, always ready to move or defend herself if necessary. One afternoon, while searching for berries near the edge of the forest, Emily stumbled into an unexpected danger. A sudden landslide of wet soil and rocks tumbled down a slope near the path, narrowly missing her. She stumbled backward, her heart pounding, and realized how fragile her existence had become. A single misstep could lead to serious injury or worse. She took a moment to sit down on a fallen log, trembling, and reflected on how alone she really was. There was no one to help her if something went wrong, no one to call, no one to save her. The thought was terrifying, but it also reminded her of the need to be careful, to think ahead, to rely on the inner strength that had kept her alive so far. As the days passed, Emily found herself developing small routines to cope with the harshness of her life. She learned to ration food, to collect rainwater, and to keep herself warm during cold nights. She would wake before sunrise, walk to the well to fetch water, forage for food, and return home to prepare a simple meal. Each day was a battle against both the elements and her own feelings of despair. But within this struggle, Emily found a sense of resilience she had never fully recognized before. Each task completed, each day survived, was a quiet victory, a small testament to her determination. Yet it wasn't just the physical challenges that weighed on her. Loneliness gnawed at her relentlessly. She missed conversation, companionship, and the simple comfort of knowing someone cared. She would sometimes talk to herself, whispering stories, imagining conversations, or even making up friends to fill the silence. It was strange, perhaps even embarrassing, but it helped her cope. The mind craves connection, and Emily's imagination became a small lifeline. It allowed her to feel less alone, even if only for a few moments each day. Her emotional struggle was intensified by memories that resurfaced unexpectedly. Every corner of her home reminded her of happier times: the kitchen where her mother baked bread, the living room where her father read to her brother, the small desk where she and her brother would play games together. These memories were bittersweet. They brought both warmth and pain. Emily learned to live with the ache, letting it remind her of love she had known, while also motivating her to survive. She realized that even if the world had abandoned her, her memories and inner strength were hers alone. Despite her careful routines, Emily's life remained precarious. One evening, a heavy storm approached, darker and fiercer than the last. The wind tore at the walls of her house, the rain battered the roof, and the temperature dropped sharply. She tried to secure her home as best as she could, but it was clear that the storm would not be easily tamed. Emily shivered, her teeth chattering, and hugged herself tightly. She thought about how vulnerable she was and how much she wished for even a small gesture of help. In moments like this, the human need for connection became unbearable, and Emily felt the weight of isolation more keenly than ever. But even in this dangerous situation, Emily's resilience shone through. She refused to let fear take over completely. She gathered what blankets and clothing she could find, set a small fire, and huddled close to it. She reminded herself that storms pass, that tomorrow is a new day, and that she had survived worse before. Her strength was quiet but undeniable. It was in these moments, facing fear and danger alone, that Emily began to understand just how much she was capable of. Then, something unexpected happened. While trying to make sense of the storm, Emily noticed a figure moving through the rain outside her window. At first, she thought it was a trick of her imagination, but the figure remained, struggling against the wind. Curiosity mixed with caution, and she cautiously peeked outside. There, across the muddy field, she saw a man approaching, steady and determined despite the weather. He carried no apparent weapon, only a large coat and a bundle of supplies. Emily's heart raced. Her first instinct was fear, but beneath it, a flicker of hope sparked. Could it be possible that someone had come for her? The man, later revealed to be John, a local rancher known for his compassion, noticed Emily watching him. He waved cautiously, signaling that he meant no harm. Emily hesitated, unsure whether to trust him. She had learned the hard way that not everyone was kind, and she had grown wary of strangers. But something about his calm demeanor, the careful way he moved through the storm, suggested he was different. After a tense moment, she decided to step outside, her bare feet sinking into the wet ground. She didn't know this man, didn't know why he had come, but instinctively she felt that this encounter might change the course of her life. This was the beginning of a turning point, though Emily did not realize it yet. The man offered her a blanket, some food, and most importantly, words of reassurance. He did not ask questions that were too personal or intrusive. Instead, he simply offered support. Emily, hesitant but desperate for help, accepted. For the first time in a long while, she felt a small sense of relief, a break in the relentless isolation that had defined her life. That night, as the storm raged on outside, Emily sat by the fire with the man. He introduced himself as John and spoke with warmth and kindness. They shared a quiet meal, and Emily listened, absorbing his calm presence like a lifeline. For the first time in years, she felt that someone truly cared about her well-being. It was a small spark of hope, but in her world of darkness, even the smallest spark can illuminate the path forward. Emily realized that her life, though still fragile and uncertain, was on the verge of change. The storm outside mirrored the storm she had endured inside herself, but now there was a hint of calm breaking through. The man's kindness, his quiet strength, offered her a glimpse of the life she had been missing. And though she could not yet fully trust him, she understood that perhaps, just perhaps, she had found someone who might help her survive not only the storm, but the loneliness and despair that had defined her life for so long. The morning after the storm, Emily awoke to a quiet room and the faint smell of fresh bread. For the first time in what felt like forever, she did not wake up to emptiness or silence. The presence of John, the kind rancher who had appeared in her life during the storm, made the world seem slightly less cold. She looked around, still cautious, unsure if this was reality or just a fleeting moment of hope. But the gentle clinking of dishes and the low hum of a fire confirmed that it was real. John had prepared a simple breakfast, warm bread, a bit of cheese, and a cup of tea. He placed the food in front of her with a soft smile, not asking questions, not demanding anything. Emily hesitated for a moment, then picked up the bread and took a small bite. The warmth of the food, both literal and metaphorical, seemed to thaw some of the icy loneliness she had carried for so long. She realized, almost reluctantly, that for the first time in years, she could trust someone. Not entirely, but enough to let her guard down just a little. John didn't rush her. He allowed Emily to eat in silence, giving her space to gather her thoughts. After a while, he spoke gently, "You've been through a lot, but you're safe here. No one is going to hurt you." His words were simple, but they carried a weight that Emily had almost forgotten existed, reassurance. She nodded, unsure how to respond, and felt a lump form in her throat. For so long, she had believed that the world had abandoned her, that no one cared. Now, she realized that at least one person did. Over the next few days, John helped Emily settle into a small routine. He showed her how to keep herself warm, how to gather food safely, and even gave her a small corner of the ranch to call her own. It was not luxurious, but it was safe and dry, an oasis compared to the struggles she had faced alone. Emily began to learn basic tasks that she had once found overwhelming, tending a small garden, collecting water, and keeping track of supplies. Each task was a small victory, a step toward independence, and she felt a quiet pride in herself that she had not felt in a long time. John never forced her to speak about her past, but he listened when she chose to share. Slowly, cautiously, Emily opened up about her family, the tragedy that had left her alone, and the long months of fear and isolation she had endured. John did not judge her. He did not offer empty platitudes. He simply listened, nodding, showing understanding and empathy. This act of listening, of giving her the space to express her pain, became a form of healing that Emily had never experienced before. She realized that part of her loneliness had come from feeling unseen, unheard, and dismissed. John's presence, his attention, made her feel seen for the first time in years. Emily also began to notice small changes in herself. She slept better, even if not perfectly, and she found moments of joy she had thought were lost forever. She laughed quietly to herself when she managed to successfully water the garden without spilling too much, or when a bird landed on the fence near her window. These little victories reminded her that life could hold beauty again, even after so much pain. She began to imagine a future where she could feel safe and valued, a future that had seemed impossible just days before. Despite the growing trust between Emily and John, challenges remained. The scars of her past were deep, and moments of fear and doubt would sometimes return. She would wake in the middle of the night, heart pounding, remembering the cold nights she had spent alone or the hunger she had endured. But John never forced her to confront these fears before she was ready. Instead, he was patient, offering comfort without pushing her beyond her limits. His patience became a lesson in itself, that healing does not happen all at once, but in small, steady steps. One day, John invited Emily to help him with some tasks on the ranch. At first, she was hesitant, unsure if she could manage the physical work. But he guided her gently, showing her how to carry water, feed animals, and repair fences. The work was hard, but it was also rewarding. Emily felt useful, capable, and connected to the world in a way she had not felt in years. The ranch became more than just a safe place. It became a space of growth, learning, and slowly, transformation. As Emily grew stronger, she began to venture beyond the immediate surroundings of the ranch. John would accompany her, teaching her about the land, the animals, and the importance of responsibility. Through these experiences, Emily learned not only practical skills but also the value of trust, friendship, and compassion. She started to understand that life, though unpredictable and often harsh, could also hold kindness and beauty if one was willing to see it. One afternoon, while walking through the fields with John, Emily paused to watch the sunset. The sky was painted in shades of orange, pink, and purple, and for the first time in a long while, she felt a sense of peace. "It's beautiful," she whispered. John nodded, smiling. "It is," he said, "and it's yours to enjoy every day if you choose to." His words struck a chord within her. She realized that she had the power to find beauty and hope in her life, even after the darkest days. Over time, the bond between Emily and John deepened. It was not a friendship based on words alone, but on trust, shared experiences, and quiet understanding. Emily began to feel safe enough to express her emotions openly, to laugh, and even to dream. She started to imagine a life beyond mere survival, a life filled with purpose, connection, and hope. John, in turn, respected her space and her pace, understanding that true support comes not from forcing change but from walking alongside someone as they find their own strength. Emily also began to notice subtle changes in how she saw herself. She no longer felt like a helpless child abandoned by the world. Instead, she started to see herself as someone capable of resilience, courage, and growth. Each day of effort, each task completed, each moment of connection with John strengthened her sense of self. She realized that while the past had shaped her, it did not define her. She had the power to create her own future, and she was beginning to believe that she could. Yet Emily's journey was far from easy. There were moments of doubt, fear, and hesitation. Sometimes she would feel overwhelmed by the weight of her past or by the uncertainty of the future. She would retreat into herself, reluctant to speak or participate. But John never judged her. He simply stayed nearby, offering quiet support, a hand when she needed it, and gentle encouragement. This consistency, this unwavering presence, helped Emily navigate the turbulence of her emotions and slowly rebuild her trust in others. One of the most significant moments in this period came when Emily faced a small but symbolic challenge, repairing a broken fence on the ranch. At first, she was unsure if she could handle the task, fearing failure. John guided her patiently, showing her step by step. Emily's hands were raw and sore, and the work was exhausting. But as she tightened the final plank and stepped back, she felt an immense sense of accomplishment. It was a moment that symbolized more than just a repaired fence. It represented her growing confidence, her ability to overcome obstacles, and her resilience in the face of hardship. As the days turned into weeks, Emily's recovery became more noticeable. Her steps were steadier, her laughter more frequent, and her outlook on life began to shift. She no longer viewed the world solely as a place of danger and abandonment. Instead, she began to see opportunities for growth, kindness, and connection. The presence of John, his guidance, and his unwavering support played a pivotal role in this transformation. He was not a savior in the traditional sense, but a steady hand, a compassionate guide who helped her navigate the difficult terrain of healing. Emily also began to help John with tasks she had once thought impossible. She fed animals, tended the garden, and even helped with minor repairs around the ranch. Each task reinforced her sense of purpose and her ability to contribute meaningfully. She realized that she was not merely a passive recipient of kindness, but an active participant in her own recovery. This shift in perspective gave her a newfound strength, a belief that she could face challenges head-on, and a deeper appreciation for the simple joys of life. By the end of this period, Emily had transformed from a lonely, frightened girl into a young woman capable of resilience, hope, and determination. The bond between her and John had grown strong, built on trust, patience, and shared experiences. Emily began to envision a future filled with possibilities, a future where she could live with dignity, purpose, and joy. And though the journey ahead was still uncertain, she knew that she was no longer alone. She had someone who believed in her, supported her, and showed her that life, even after hardship, could be filled with hope. Over the following months, Emily's life began to change in ways she had never imagined. The quiet days at the ranch, which at first had seemed like nothing more than survival, became a place of learning, growth, and discovery. She started each day with a sense of purpose, waking early to help John feed the animals, collect water, and tend the garden. What had once felt like chores became opportunities to challenge herself, to gain strength, and to feel capable. Every day, she realized more and more that she could handle things she had once thought impossible. The bond between Emily and John continued to grow. It was built not on words alone, but on shared experiences, mutual respect, and quiet acts of kindness. John never pressured Emily to move faster than she was ready to, never forced her to speak about her past before she felt comfortable, and never judged her for the mistakes she inevitably made along the way. This patience became a foundation for Emily's healing. She learned that trust was not something that could be demanded, it had to be earned, and she allowed herself to trust John gradually, in small steps. Emily also began to experience moments of joy she hadn't felt in years. She would watch the sun rise over the fields, feel the wind in her hair as she ran errands across the ranch, and listened to the birds sing in the morning. She laughed again, sometimes quietly to herself, sometimes with John when they shared light-hearted moments. These small joys, once unimaginable in her life of despair, reminded her that happiness could exist even after the darkest times. Each smile, each laugh, was a reminder that her heart was healing. The ranch itself became a place of learning. John taught Emily practical skills, like mending fences, tending livestock, and working with tools. At first, Emily was clumsy and unsure of herself, dropping tools or struggling with tasks that seemed straightforward to John. But he was patient, guiding her with calm instructions and gentle encouragement. Each task she completed boosted her confidence, helping her see that she was capable of handling real responsibilities. She began to take pride in her work, realizing that she could contribute meaningfully to the life around her. As Emily gained practical skills, her emotional growth was equally remarkable. She began to confront her fears in small, manageable ways. Nights alone, once terrifying, became opportunities to reflect rather than panic. She learned to organize her thoughts, to recognize when anxiety was taking over, and to find ways to calm herself. She began to see that while the past had shaped her, it did not have to define her future. With John's guidance, she realized that she had the power to make choices, to protect herself, and to build a life that felt safe and meaningful. One of the turning points came when John suggested Emily try caring for a young, injured foal that had been found near the edge of the ranch. At first, Emily hesitated. She had never cared for an animal in such a vulnerable state, and she feared she might fail. But John reassured her, offering guidance while allowing her to take the lead. Emily approached the foal cautiously, learning to feed it, clean it, and comfort it. Over time, a deep bond formed between them. Caring for the foal gave Emily a sense of responsibility, connection, and accomplishment. It also mirrored her own journey. Nurturing something fragile and helping it grow reflected the healing she was experiencing herself. Emily's confidence began to extend beyond the ranch. She started venturing into town, initially with John by her side, to run errands or gather supplies. Each trip was a small challenge, forcing her to interact with people outside the safe space of the ranch. At first, she was nervous, unsure how she would be received. But the kindness and respect she had learned from John gave her the courage to engage with the world again. People noticed the quiet strength in her, the determination in her eyes, and she began to feel that she could belong, even in a place that had once seemed indifferent. In addition to her practical and emotional growth, Emily began exploring her own interests. She rediscovered her love for drawing, a passion she had set aside during the most difficult times of her life. She would spend hours sketching animals on the ranch, the landscape, or simple objects she found around her. This creative outlet became a form of therapy, allowing her to express emotions she sometimes could not put into words. Each drawing was a small celebration of her progress, a reminder that her life was slowly becoming her own again. Emily also started to reflect on the concept of family and belonging. While she could not replace the family she had lost, she began to see that connections could be formed in new ways. The bond she shared with John, and even with the animals and the land around her, created a sense of home she had not felt in years. She realized that family was not always defined by blood alone, but by care, support, and mutual respect. This insight gave her comfort and a new perspective on life, allowing her to envision a future where she could feel safe and loved. As the months passed, Emily encountered challenges that tested her resilience. One day, a sudden illness struck one of the animals on the ranch, and Emily had to act quickly to help nurse it back to health. She applied everything she had learned, using both practical skills and careful observation. The experience was exhausting and stressful, but the successful recovery of the animal filled her with pride and reinforced her belief in her own abilities. She realized that she was capable of handling crises, that she could remain calm under pressure, and that her growth was not just emotional but practical as well. Emily also faced moments of self-doubt. She would sometimes question whether she deserved the care and support she was receiving, whether she could truly overcome the scars of her past. In these moments, John's quiet presence was invaluable. He did not lecture or scold. He simply reminded her of her progress, her resilience, and her strengths. His unwavering support became a stabilizing force, helping Emily navigate the waves of uncertainty and fear. Over time, she began to internalize this reassurance, learning to trust herself and her own judgment. Another milestone in Emily's transformation came when she was asked to help plan the daily tasks on the ranch. John allowed her to make decisions about feeding schedules, water collection, and animal care routines. At first, she was hesitant, worried she might make mistakes. But with careful guidance, she learned to trust her instincts, to organize tasks effectively, and to take responsibility for her decisions. This sense of autonomy was empowering, teaching her that she could manage not only small aspects of life, but also the broader responsibilities that came with independence. Throughout this period, Emily's emotional resilience continued to grow. She learned to recognize the signs of stress, to manage anxiety, and to take proactive steps to maintain her mental well-being. She practiced mindfulness while working in the garden, reflecting quietly while observing the changing seasons. She discovered that small moments of calm and focus could restore her energy and provide clarity. These practices became part of her daily routine, reinforcing the lessons she was learning about patience, self-care, and emotional stability. Emily's journey of transformation was not only about survival, but also about purpose. She began to see herself as someone who could make a difference, however small, in the lives of others. Caring for the animals, maintaining the ranch, and even simply offering a kind word to John became ways for her to contribute meaningfully. Each act of responsibility and kindness reinforced her sense of self-worth, showing her that she was capable, valuable, and deserving of care. By the end of this period, Emily had changed profoundly. She was stronger, more confident, and capable of facing challenges with courage and determination. Her bond with John had deepened, grounded in trust, respect, and shared experiences. She had learned that healing is a gradual process, built through patience, effort, and connection. She had also learned to see the beauty and possibility in life once again, finding hope even in moments that had once felt bleak and hopeless. Emily's journey was far from over, but she had reached a point where she could envision a future filled with opportunity, connection, and purpose. She understood that while the past had shaped her, it did not define her. The lessons she had learned on the ranch, resilience, patience, trust, and self-worth, would guide her as she continued to grow and build a life she could be proud of. And though she could not yet see all the ways her life would unfold, she knew that she had the strength, courage, and support to face whatever came next. Over time, Emily began to truly understand the depth of the change in her life. The girl who had once wandered through the world alone, frightened, hungry, and hopeless, was now growing into a young woman filled with strength, confidence, and purpose. The ranch, once just a safe place, had become a sanctuary where she could learn, heal, and discover who she really was. Each day she spent with John and the animals, she realized how far she had come from the desperate, abandoned girl she once had been. Emily's mornings now began with quiet joy. She would wake before the sun, listening to the gentle sounds of the ranch, the low moo of cows, the rustle of leaves in the wind, and the soft clucking of chickens. She no longer woke with fear or despair, but with a sense of purpose. Her day would start with chores, feeding the animals and tending the garden, but she approached each task with pride and a growing sense of responsibility. These simple routines, once mundane or even terrifying, had become meaningful. Each task completed was a reminder of her independence and her ability to care for herself and others. John continued to guide her, but now more as a mentor than a caretaker. He allowed Emily to take the lead in planning daily routines, making decisions about the care of animals, and managing small tasks around the ranch. Emily embraced this responsibility, feeling empowered by the trust John placed in her. She had learned that responsibility was not just about completing tasks, it was about confidence, decision-making, and caring for those who depended on her. This new sense of purpose filled her with pride and a quiet joy she had never known in her earlier, lonely life. As Emily's confidence grew, she also began to think about her future. For years, she had believed her life would be defined by hardship, isolation, and loss. Now, she realized that she had the power to shape her own destiny. She began to dream of possibilities, continuing her education, helping others in need, and building a life where she could feel safe, respected, and valued. These dreams were no longer distant or impossible. They were real goals she could work toward. Each step she had taken on the ranch had built the foundation for this brighter future. Emily also began to form deeper connections with the community. While she had once been invisible to the people in town, she now engaged with them with a quiet confidence. She visited local shops, helped neighbors when she could, and even shared her knowledge of caring for animals with others who needed guidance. Slowly, people began to see her not as the lonely girl who had been abandoned, but as a capable, resilient young woman who had overcome tremendous challenges. These small interactions reinforced Emily's sense of belonging, showing her that connection and trust were possible outside the walls of the ranch. One of the most significant aspects of Emily's growth was her emotional resilience. She had faced fear, hunger, and isolation, and had survived. She had learned to manage her emotions, to confront her past, and to embrace hope even when circumstances seemed difficult. She no longer feared the world in the same way. Instead, she approached life with caution, wisdom, and determination. She understood that challenges would still come, but she now possessed the tools, support, and inner strength to face them head-on. Emily's relationship with John had also evolved. What had begun as cautious trust had grown into a strong bond of friendship and mutual respect. John had never forced her to move faster than she was ready or pressured her to share more than she wished. Instead, he had guided her patiently, teaching her practical skills, listening to her fears, and supporting her decisions. Emily had come to rely on John not just for guidance, but for companionship, reassurance, and the kind of understanding that can heal deep wounds. Their relationship demonstrated the power of kindness, patience, and genuine care. The animals on the ranch played a significant role in Emily's continued transformation. The one singered foal she had helped care for was now strong and healthy, and Emily had developed a deep bond with it. She found comfort in the routines of feeding, grooming, and caring for the animals. They were her companions, her students, and her family. Through her interactions with them, she discovered empathy, patience, and the satisfaction of seeing growth and recovery. Caring for the animals also reinforced her understanding that nurturing others could be a path to healing herself. Emily also found joy in creativity once more. She returned to her drawing, capturing the landscapes of the ranch, the animals she cared for, and the moments of beauty she observed each day. Her sketches became a visual diary of her journey, a way to express emotions she sometimes could not put into words. Art allowed her to reflect on her progress, celebrate her victories, and express gratitude for the life she was building. Through creativity, Emily discovered another layer of her identity and a deeper sense of fulfillment. As Emily became more confident and independent, she also began to help others in small ways. She shared her skills with neighbors and friends, assisting them with tasks around their homes or teaching them about animal care and gardening. These acts of kindness were rewarding, reinforcing her sense of purpose and showing her that she could have a positive impact on the world around her. She realized that the compassion she had received from John could now be extended to others, creating a ripple effect of care and support. One day, John suggested they take a trip to the nearby town together, allowing Emily to explore places she had once been too afraid to visit. As they walked through the familiar streets, Emily felt a mixture of nostalgia and pride. She remembered how alone and invisible she had once felt, and now she moved with confidence, holding her head high and greeting people with quiet warmth. The contrast between her past and present was stark, and she realized just how much she had grown. She was no longer a passive observer of life but an active participant, shaping her own experiences and building meaningful connections. Emily's growth was also marked by self-reflection and gratitude. She often paused to acknowledge the journey she had taken, the hardships she had endured, the lessons she had learned, and the people who had helped her along the way. She understood that while she could not change her past, she could honor it by embracing the present and working toward a brighter future. This awareness gave her a profound sense of peace, as well as the motivation to continue growing and learning. As time passed, Emily began to set personal goals. She wanted to continue developing her skills, deepen her knowledge of animal care, and pursue opportunities for education and personal growth. She also wanted to help other young people who might be facing challenges similar to those she had endured. These goals gave her a sense of direction and purpose, transforming her hope into action. Emily had moved from surviving to thriving, from despair to empowerment. The culmination of Emily's journey came when she realized that she had the power to define her own life. She no longer saw herself as a victim of circumstance, but as a capable, resilient individual who had faced immense challenges and emerged stronger. She had learned that life could be difficult, that people could disappoint, but that kindness, perseverance, and self-belief could transform even the darkest situations. This realization was liberating, giving her the confidence to face the future with optimism and courage. In the end, Emily's story became a testament to the power of resilience, hope, and human connection. The girl who had been left to survive alone in a harsh world had found her way to safety, trust, and empowerment. She had discovered her own strength, formed meaningful bonds, and built a life filled with purpose, joy, and hope. The once frightened, lonely girl had grown into a young woman ready to embrace the future, knowing that while challenges would come, she had the tools, support, and inner strength to overcome them. Emily's journey also illustrated the profound impact of a single act of kindness. John's willingness to help, guide, and support her had changed the course of her life forever. His patience, compassion, and trust had given her the space to heal, learn, and grow. Through his actions, Emily had learned that one person's empathy could create a ripple effect, transforming lives in ways that might never be fully measured. Finally, Emily understood that life was not only about survival, but about growth, purpose, and connection. She had discovered that even after the darkest moments, hope could emerge, and that with patience, perseverance, and compassion, a new chapter could begin. She had learned to embrace the present, honor her journey, and look forward to the future with courage. Emily had become a living example of resilience, showing that even in the face of abandonment and hardship, a life filled with strength, love, and possibility was within reach. The ranch, the animals, the work, and the friendship with John had all shaped her into the person she had always hoped to become. She now knew that life's challenges could be faced, that loneliness could be healed, and that even the smallest acts of kindness could change everything. Emily's story concluded not with an end, but with a beginning, a life full of hope, growth, and the promise of a brighter future.